Kruger National Park is South Africa's largest wildlife reserve, renowned for its vast landscapes and exceptional wildlife sightings. It's not a zoo, although sometimes it did feel like one, except that the animals were the visitors, and not necessarily in a good way. We visited Kruger in June 2026. Kruger wasn't a pleasant trip, not by any stretch of the imagination. But the range of naturalistic wildlife behaviors we observed, the scale of the park, and the remoteness of the wilderness more than make up for the lack of creature comforts. The intimacy of a random encounter with an animal cannot be found anywhere else. On the fourth or fifth day of the trip, I was determined to find a leopard, not just see one from afar in a tree, or look at a shadow with hints of a leopard, but actually encounter one up close. I spent probably 5 or 6 hours driving up and down one road bordering a river. Then one walked up to us and disappeared into the brush. It was probably a 30-second encounter, but it was very different from a guide simply pointing at a tree. I think the experience is a lot more intimate when you are the only vehicle around. Kruger is unique in the sense that you can self-drive, unlike most other safaris where guided tours are the only practical option. With a guide, you are shown something. By yourself, you find it. I am okay with that trade-off. Seeing perhaps fewer animals, but having each encounter be just a little more special. Perhaps achievement is not the best word to describe it, but with a guide, what is lost is the process leading up to the experience. In a self-drive situation, you navigate. You decide where to go and why. Certainly, you make poorer decisions than a professional, but the decision is yours and the rewards are yours. With a guide, you just turn off your brain and look at stuff. I did 2 guided tours on this trip. They were the most mundane, mind-numbing experiences ever. Kruger suffers from overtourism. A traffic jam of vehicles encircling the animals meaningfully detracts from the experience. So does the reckless and antisocial behavior of some safari operators, and the general disrepair of the park. But it's not just pure tourist numbers. It's a fundamental tension between day trippers on safari vehicles and those who overnight in the park. Day trippers on externally operated safari vehicles rush from place to place. They try to squeeze in as much as they can in 3 hours. They drive recklessly. They cut in and out of traffic. And they block off animal sightings. I saw, on more than one occasion, these vehicles nearly run over an animal, just so their guests would have a better view. It is insane. Beyond the specific actions, it is the general vibe. These tour groups bring a deeply unpleasant vibe to the park. It is reminiscent of the stereotypical Black Friday rush, with 100 people fighting over the last discounted television. They point to a deeper problem with travel itself. Travel today is hyper-optimized. There is always a checklist of things to do, see, and eat. The more you squeeze into the limited days you have, the better. I used to travel that way too. It is just human nature to want to make the best of things. But in doing so, you perhaps see more, but experience less. I do not think most individual day trippers know beforehand what they are getting into when they book an external operator. But the aggregate trend exists, and operators adjust to the demand. If you go online, the common recommendation is 3 days in Kruger, and so people stay for 3 days, expect to see wildlife served up on a plate, and the operators try to meet that demand by rushing everywhere. The end result is these tourists get their photos of various animals, but they sacrifice the experience of the journey. Part of it is surely that travel has become almost too easy, to the point where for the vast majority of destinations, zero planning is required. The convenience is great, but it does take away from the intentionality and ceremoniality of going on a trip. Without intentionality, travel just becomes a menu of items you pick and choose. I think it is about allocating the right amount of time for the experience you are looking for. We spent 13 days in the park. I would say we probably saw a good 30 to 40% of it, but we experienced maybe just 10%. There is a difference between seeing and experiencing. Seeing an elephant herd is one thing. Spending an hour following them around and observing their behaviors is a vastly different experience. It's the difference between just being in a place versus watching it fly by as though you were on a train. It used to be said that the best way to spend money is on experiences as opposed to material things. Today, everything is marketed as an experience, when really it is little more than physically seeing something with your eyes. It is a difference of experiential depth. I think that the discerning traveler would choose to see less and experience more. At least that's my personal view now. I would not pretend that an hour with an elephant herd yields some unique insight or deeper meaning. I am not a zoologist, but observing a range of behaviors is infinitely more interesting, at least to me. Fighting, courtship, the group structure. It is more interesting than just watching them for a few minutes and leaving. Perhaps experiential depth does require accepting that you may miss something better. But if you are rushing from place to place, you are missing the forest for the trees. In this regard, the less popular northern areas were much better. Fewer cars, almost no external safari operators, and in general a more intimate space. The park's disrepair was visible everywhere. There was a lot of damage from the floods the previous December. Many roads were closed and under repair when we were there. This was more than half a year after the floods. The chalets, while clean and functional, were probably over 50 years old by now. The park is obviously under significant financial constraints, but apparently the floods were really bad as well. In a theoretical situation, I would probably accept more visitor-facing disrepair if it meant scarce funds were protecting wildlife. But I do not think it can be as cleanly decoupled as that. In my view, Kruger should raise prices tenfold. The current prices are way too low for the experience. It has the potential to be a massive money-spinning machine and could easily generate multi-billion-dollar revenues to fund conservation. At the same time, the park can keep a much tighter leash on the fewer guests they get and their behavior for the benefit of the animals. That would generate its own set of problems, certainly, but I think it is probably the best approach to conservation. There is an argument to be made that the next generation, who perhaps would never see these animals up close because of the pricing, would care less about their conservation, but that is easily solvable through targeted local subsidies. As for international visitors, too bad. A person from Europe, America, or Asia, for instance, does not have some intrinsic right to affordable animal viewing. The people who have lived there for thousands of years certainly should have free or heavily subsidized access. We are just visitors. But for them, it is their culture. I think it is just common sense. It is similar in Thailand, where access to temples and national parks is heavily subsidized for locals. Westerners whine and moan about it all the time online. They complain about dual pricing. But the reality is that at the end of the day, it is their land, their history, and their culture. Expecting equal access as someone for whom these places are an integral part of their self-identity is entitled at best and delusional at worst. Doing this would turn experiential depth into a privilege of the wealthy. But I do not think there is anything wrong with that, as long as local residents are given the same opportunity to engage in the park. As someone born in Asia, I do not have some divine right to affordably experience animals in Africa. If I can afford it, great. If I cannot, then it is what it is. If the goal is for the system to serve conservation, then making more funds available is objectively good, even if it disrupts the status quo. South Africa still has many problems. Apartheid was, and probably still is, a major problem in South Africa. Even on my trip, literally everywhere I looked, the staff were black, and the customers were white. Corruption, crime, scams, and so on are still prevalent across much of the country. I personally thought that South Africa was quite dodgy, but at least in the area of wildlife conservation, South Africa is easily doing more than most other countries. But tourism has evolved significantly from when Kruger was established 100 years ago, and Kruger needs to evolve with it, or risk turning into the next Bali, Kyoto, or Venice. But even in these areas, local residents have a voice and can push back against over-tourism. The animals in Kruger cannot.